Thank you, Sally, for your kind words, and good afternoon. It's an honor to join you. I'm a bit overwhelmed by it. It's 8 counties in the district, so retail politics is almost a luxury. You do as much of it as possible, and then you have to figure a way to get resources to go wholesale to get the message out. Now this is a critical time because everything sacred is on the ballot. Democracy, our dignity, mutual respect, and the sustainability of the planet. I think it's critical for us to bring back a sense of civility, common sense, respect for the Constitution, and respect for the Golden Rule. I've taught for 50 years in the public schools, in the prisons, and the last 37 years at Coker University. My grandmother taught in the public schools in Pittsburgh. My dad grew up in a boarding house. He was a tail gunner on B-17s in World War II. He overcame his PTSD, went on to become a small-town newspaper publisher. My brother's been in broadcast journalism. Family would have civil discussions. He was an Eisenhower Republican. My mom was a Kennedy Democrat. There were civil discussions. We need to return to that. And I think Eisenhower would be strongly supporting Biden these days based on his record. Yeah. My folks taught me about civility, resilience, and hard work. And when I started UCLA, I worked as a guy in a factory. I worked summers as a commercial fisherman. I did farm work. When I graduated, I spent some time in the Middle East, decided I'd be a teacher, taught in the public schools, junior high school, coached, taught in the prisons. I took it to graduate school, was teaching a year of maximum security prison. I did community organizing in Riverside, California, pulled together 13 different groups. I met a guy that was part of the Pentagon Papers. Y'all remember that? Soft spot in my heart for anybody that tells the truth about what's going on with government, gives up their job to tell the truth. He was teaching at the University of California, Riverside, never expected to go to graduate school in international studies. Great experience. Friends there told me you must visit war zones if you're going to be a good teacher. So I went to Nicaragua 1985 to look at the war down there. People were anxious to talk to me. Each time I traveled to another country in a war zone, I got a little more bold about it. I was in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza during the first Intifada. Heard the stories of Palestinians. Heard the stories of Palestinians that spent 25 years in prison, and the honor was to teach Palestinian history. I knew we needed a political, not military solution in the region. I've been fortunate to serve on a number of community boards, wrote a book on the media coverage of the assassination of John Kennedy called Burying the Lead. In this campaign, I won't accept a dime of corporate or banking money because no one can serve two masters. Money has made our elections into auctions, and you have to avoid that if you're going to speak common sense for the common good. I'll fight for people over profits and common sense for the common good. I believe we can build a country where Democrats and Republicans respect each other, respect the Constitution, and respect the Golden Rule, where equal opportunity is honored as much as hard work, where no one is unseen and unheard, where we invest more in America and create greater opportunity and security, where we honor the wonder of God's creation. We seek a nation at peace with its own conscience. President Biden's record, as Sally has mentioned, has been admirable, but they're unable to communicate it effectively to the general public. We've created more than 15 million new jobs. Unemployment is at the lowest rate in 50 years. Inflation is down. We've created over 1 million manufacturing jobs. We've brought back manufacturing, critical components for computer chips, back home, Congressman Ro Khanna was supporting that act. He's supporting my campaign. We've done this, but the word hasn't gotten out effectively because we are in a new media landscape that the public in America is unaccustomed to. Things were divided in 1968 when I came of age, and Robert Kennedy was assassinated. I was working on his campaign. I'm an old Democrat, like a lot of you. Martin Luther King was assassinated. Some of those words I'm going to share on the campaign trail. They have to be. But what we have now is one media outlet, Fox, and some others that have copied Fox that don't believe in equal reporting. It's essentially propaganda. It's essentially the big lie, constant attack, and demonize your adversary so that they're the enemy of the people. This is right out of Germany in the 1930s when they talked about making Germany great again. Mm-hmm. This is something the American public is not accustomed to, that we have to be aware of. Everything sacred is on the ballot this time. We confront the old poisons of money and partisanship, where the wealthiest 1% put 90% of the money into elections. We confront huge corporations and banks that often pledge allegiance to the best investment opportunity, not to the next generation. We must also confront our addiction to materialism, where the rich have more wealth than biblical kings, while half of our country lives paycheck to paycheck. Biden's record would be far better, but we have a do-nothing Congress led by Republicans that will not pass legislation on basic issues. They've talked over and over again about problems at the border. When legislation comes through to deal with those problems, to help our allies in Europe, Ukrainians, they found ways to stop that legislation from moving forward. It's a do-nothing Congress. I intend to get things done. I think compromise, form the Constitution, and that's how we move the country forward. First speech on the floor of Congress I'd like to have included. It's the first member of Congress that can talk about the school-to-prison pipeline that's taught in the schools and taught in the prisons. And I'll tell stories of inmates that said they fell into despair at the age of 11, 12, and 13. They didn't pick their schools, their community, or their country. We've made some bad choices. And either we're going to leave no child behind or we just keep talking about it. Either we're going to have liberty and justice for all, or we're just going to keep talking about it. Either we're going to do unto the least of these, or we're just going to keep talking about it. I believe with Marion Wright Edelman, who inspired Martin Luther King's Poor People's March on Washington, that all children have a right to food, health care, housing, good schools, safe streets, clean air, and clean water. My campaign is dedicated to trying to run a day of prayer and song at the steps of the State House in September to remind those in the State House that children have rights. We seek for you to join us at that gathering, because part of what we need to do in order to bring our country together and move it forward is to work outside the election cycle as well as inside the election cycle. That's right. I intend to use language in that speech that clarifies what Martin Luther King was saying when he was working with the sanitation workers in Memphis before he was assassinated, where he said it is a crime in this wealthy nation for people to work for starvation wages. If you calculate the cost of living, people are making less money now than they were making back then. It was a crime then, it's a crime now. I'm going to call it out as such. It's unfair to families, and it splits families, and it destroys hope. King said the worst form of cruelty is to deny someone health care. We've got 50 million people that don't have access to health care in this country. We merely need to look across the border to Canada to see what they've been doing since 1971. Everyone gets health care, and it's better for business at 2/3 the cost. It is better for business. Businesses pushed that forward in 1971, and and people in Canada live 3 years longer than we do. There are models out there that we can use. I'm concerned about where the Supreme Court is going on a number of issues. Not just Citizens United, where it said that unlimited money can come into super PACs and you don't have to disclose where the money comes from. So your donation can be mixed with money from China and Russia and Germany and no one knows it. This Supreme Court made a decision saying a woman doesn't have that right to choose. That the government is okay stepping in between the sacred discussions between a woman and her husband, her doctor, or her minister. A woman has a right to choose. Reproductive rights need to be reestablished in this country. We need to do some basic things for national security, like protecting our electrical grid that's vulnerable to cyber attack, as well as for efficiency to bring sustainable energy into the cities. Until we do that, we aren't going to be able to protect ourselves well, and we aren't going to be able to move towards sustainable energy as fast as we need to. Because right now our civilization is a force of nature that threatens our security. And there have been reports from the UN, our CIA, from the Defense Intelligence Agency that climate change is a greater threat to national security than terrorism because of the floods, famines, the wildfires, the droughts. It was a contributing factor to the war in Syria that is still ongoing, to the war in Yemen that is still ongoing, to the war in Sudan that is still ongoing. We have climate refugees trying to cross our border, desperate for a better life. We need to look more clearly at what we stand for as a nation with immigration policy. To what extent do we value the Statue of Liberty with people that are fleeing violence, they're fleeing oppression, and they're fleeing climate change? We need to fix what's going on at the border. We need to have a policy that's fair and dignified, and I welcome Republicans to engage in that debate so that we can move forward, fix our immigration policy and our asylum system. You know, it was a small group of people that joined Francis Marion, and I'll pull this to a close and I'll be around for questions, but when during the Revolutionary War things looked dark and Washington's army was in retreat and we were winning by not losing, and the desperate effort was to change things in South Carolina where we didn't have many resources, and Colonel Francis Marion pulled together a militia in the swamps with volunteers in order to disrupt the British supply lines and communication lines. And he held out for years, and he succeeded with it. And there's a plaque to him. I mean, you all have heard the story, but on the plaque, as you're coming out of Johnsonville, who was in that band of people that risked their lives, their fortune, and their sacred honor to form this country? French Huguenots that were religious dissidents that wanted to start a new life and wanted freedom. There were Presbyterians, there were Methodists, there were Baptists, there were Jews, there were freed slaves, there were runaway slaves, they were Native American. They wanted freedom, and they risked everything for it. And out of their quest for freedom came our country. And to honor freedom is to honor diversity. To honor freedom is to honor dignity. To honor freedom is to honor democracy during a time of crisis. We're the land of the free and the home of the brave, and we're brave enough to see ourselves in others and know that we're sisters and brothers. When we're brave enough to fight for democracy when it really is on the line. When we're brave enough to follow the golden rule. E pluribus unum. Out of many, we are one. God bless America.
Hyman.
Sure.
For U.S. Congress.